Super. Thank you so much, guys, for joining in again. And Hardik, over to you.
Thanks, JD. Hope I'm audible to all. Firstly, good evening to everyone, and good morning to our special guest, Ross Akin, and Mr. Rahul for joining in. I know Akin is caught up with a customer escalation, back in his office, but still, since he had committed this time to us in advance, he did agree to join in for the first 30, 40 minutes, even after a massive customer escalation at his site. So thank you to all three of you for making time and joining in today's panel discussion. Let me give start with a brief introduction about our three panel members who have joined in today. Akin is the Chief Commercial Officer for the Target Group. Comes with massive experience, on the finance side. The reason why we have him today on our panel is for the depth of knowledge that he brings in, especially with his interactions with the FCA regulator in his own organization for Target, being a principal, registered as a principal within the FCA. Akin is involved with transforming customer experience by ensuring client engagement via innovative commercial solutions that foster a partnership approach. He has played a critical role in allowing Target to deliver the best business outcomes for clients and their customers whilst enabling their continuous growth. So thank you, Akin, for accepting the invitation and being part of the panel for today. Thank you. We have also been joined by Ross Cullen. I don't think now he needs any introduction. Has joined 3UK very, very recently. Comes with an illicit experience of more than 20 years. He has been working, in his previous stint, he has been engaged with various multinational banks, including Royal Bank of Scotland, Barclays, and Virgin Media. His experience with financial services has mainly been within the quality assurance and monitoring roles, along with oversight of various activities across data management, risk management, policy adherence, and operational governance. Once again, Ross, welcome to Tech Mahindra. We are also joined in by Mr. Rahul. He is an assistant police inspector, cyber cell for Mumbai Police. He is in charge of the Bangur Nagar police station. Has overall 15 years of extensive experience with Maharashtra Police, specializing in cyber cases, and has played a pivotal role in many big investigations which grabbed newspaper headlines in the recent times. Rahul sir, on behalf of Tech Mahindra, welcome for today's panel session. Thank you for joining in. With this, I'll quickly straight away dive into some of the questions that I have for all three of you. Fundamentally, the approach that I'm going to take for today's session is with Akin, since he interacts quite a bit with the regulator FCA. So possibly I'll begin with you. So considering you have an extensive experience, in and working relationship with FCA, can you please share some insights on the ethos of FCA, which is a part of their objectives and principles, Akin?
Thanks for the introduction. Some of our TechM colleagues might know me. Obviously, Target is a wholly owned subsidiary of Tech Mahindra. We do the regulator services on behalf of Tech Mahindra. So, what's the ethos of the FCA? I think we go back to 2008 when when we had the financial crash, in the UK, across Europe. It was a global one. It's a global financial. So one of the images that lingers in everybody's mind is that day when people woke up and all of a sudden Northern Rock, which was a big lender in the UK, big lender big mortgage lender, all of a sudden ran out of money. And we had people there wanting to take money out, so the government took a step back, and the Financial Services Authority at the time, questions were being raised of how effective they were. How could we have a situation where banks that we trust to handle, one of our most important assets, which is our liquid asset, which is money. If you don't You know, people say money makes the world go round. If you don't have money, there's a lot of things you can't do. To have a situation in the economy where we run out of money. And it came to the fore that banks were taking a level of risk with our money. The money that banks spend is the money that you put in. Banks don't manufacture their own money. It's the money that you and I put into those banks. That's the money that they use to generate more money. If we all don't put our money in banks, the banks will not have any money. So it became apparent that banks were taking a level of risk with money that we put in, and the government felt that there needs to be a better protection for you and I, and so the FCA came into being on the back of that, and the core ethos of the FCA is to make sure that there is no detriment to customers. When I say customers, it's you and I. It's your dad, your mom, your brother, your sister. You go into a bank, you open an account, you put your money in there. When you get paid every month or every week, your money goes into a bank account. The FCA wants to make sure that you and I are better protected. So they have come up with clear principles for the financial services industry, not just banks, the financial services industry, to make sure that at its core, whatever you do, one of the guiding principles is to ensure that there is no detriment to your customers that use that service. To make sure that if you and I have a complaint, if we are going to take a banking product, that number one, if it's a complaint, that your complaints are dealt with within a time frame to make sure that you feel like you have a fair hearing. And if it's a case that they're trying to sell you products, that they make it clear to you, crystal clear, what those products are. One of the big scandals that happened as well was the PPI scandal in the UK, and this was down to banks selling products where people were taking insurance that they don't need. So what the FCA is doing by putting these principles in place is that whenever you take out any banking product, any financial services product, I should say, that there is clarity on why you've taken it out, that they continue to keep you informed about that product, and they make sure that throughout the life cycle of you having that product, that you are clear where you stand in terms of if you have any issues with it, how you get treated. So because that is the bedrock of any economy, that is the people feel safe to invest, the people feel safe to put money in, because if you don't have that, you will have the crumbling of our financial economy if people don't trust the financial services of that country. So that's the real key ethos of the FCA. It's about customers, you and I, to make sure that we are better protected.
Thanks, Akin. I think that really goes with the, I think a couple of months ago when we started on the FCA journey ourselves, it completely aligns with the FCA handbook that some of us might have gone through. So thank you for that insight. And if I may ask you, with your personal experience, how is the FCA regulator to work with? I always recall, I think at the beginning when, my first interaction with some of the 3 UK compliance leads, had begun, especially dealing with FCA. The initial statement was start thinking like a bank. And I think in the initial opening of yours, when you mentioned about the ethos that it is for any customer with financial product that they are buying in, I think that needs to be protected at all times. So, so that I think is clearly explains how important this regulator is, and hence comes to my next question: that in your experience, how is it easy, difficult to deal with this regulator?
Yeah, so in terms of dealing with the regulator, they can be your best friend and they can be your worst nightmare. And how the regulator interacts with you is how well you keep with the principles of the FCA principles. Clearly, they are there not as a shadow on your back all the time, but they're there to make sure they maintain and they enforce the regulations and the guidelines in place. And mainly, they operate in the way where they don't tell you how to run your business, but they will guide you. They will give you information when you need it. With the FCA, like with most things, ignorance is not a defense. So if you don't know, you ask, and they're very good at coming back with guidance, with help and support when we need it. But if you like with most organizations, you put your trust in people, and people will be people. People do things wrong. People make mistakes, and that happens. And what the FCA, one of the key things with the FCA, that when things go wrong, tell them, make them aware of it, so that by making them aware of it, it's not a case of we're just reporting to the head teacher. It demonstrates that you understand the problem that you have, but also you understand what you need to do to fix it. And that's the one thing that one of the key principles that they hold dear, because one of the things that happened into that when banks and financial institutions saw things going wrong, everybody was hiding it. Nobody was saying anything about it and assuming that the problem will go away. And the problem never goes away. They only get worse. And one of the things that the FCA wants us to do is to tell them when things go wrong, because once you tell them, it just gives them a view of a mature organization that understands the problem, understands what solutions they need to put in place.
Understood. Thank you. So I think let's not consider FCA regulator as a headmaster, head teacher, but like a mentor, as a friend. If there is a problem, do let them know, and possibly they will not come back with a letter with penalty, but with some guidance of how we can improve our governance structure, our control environment better. I know Ross has, like I had mentioned in the introduction, Ross has an illicit experience in his previous stint with various financial institutions. I know one of the financial institutions, Virgin Money, had an FCA enforcement. At that point in time, Ross was responsible for governance and quality assurance for Virgin Media. So maybe if you can share with your personal experience, Ross, how was it working with the FCA at that time, when I suspect that one of the FCA regulators representative would be sitting next to you in the same office, and the management also expects you to deliver the outcomes?
Yeah, morning all, or evening all. So yeah, absolutely, I can share some experience in relation to that particular events at Virgin Money. And I think as Akin touched on earlier on, I think the FCA can be your best friend, but it can also be your greatest enemy in terms of relationships. I think it's very important, and that's certainly where I come in terms of our role within 3UK, is to make sure that we have that interaction, clear transparency with the regulator. The other bit, Akin, that you touched on was, tell them when things are going wrong, make sure that we're being completely transparent, and that's the key thing for me. And ultimately, I think going back to that example at Virgin Money, which I'll come on to, that's where it went wrong, right? So that we hadn't been transparent. We certainly hadn't been transparent with the customers, which led to quite a significant implications for the bank. What I should actually clarify, just as part of the introduction, Hardy, because I actually joined the business after this. So the company was already in enforcement, so I'm taking no responsibility for what happened there. But yeah, I mean, jokingly, I think so. I was kind of sent in to try and help and try and get them out of that situation, but that's an example of probably one of the most extreme examples of the FCA enforcement and powers, are that they, in that instance, due to the mis-selling that had occurred, not just within Virgin Money, but across all of the UK banks in relation to payment protection insurance, as Akin touched on. In that instance, the FCA appointed a skilled person. So we had not only direct FCA representation, but the skilled person were on site, within our office premises. And, I jokingly said earlier on that they were sat directly beside us, and in most cases they were, right? They join all of your meetings, regardless of whether they're invited or not. You know, they sit beside you, so they're involved in, they hear everything that's going on in the business. And that can be really difficult as well in a period of change, because clearly we want to be transparent with the regulator, but at the same time, you know, the business is going through a really challenging time, and actually trying to make things better. And this was that was a UK-wide scandal, I think, probably, akin is the best way to describe it. You know, it was all over all the news worldwide. It led to significant fines for most of the organisations, and not, hundreds of millions of pounds of redress going out to the customers, which was great in the end. But yeah, really challenging times. But that's probably a more extreme example, so I don't want to use that to put anyone off, but just to kind of make you aware of the powers that the FCA do hold. You know, that's probably one of the more extreme. Yeah, when they actually bring their appointed people on site to live as part of your organisation, and that went on for probably the first 12 or 18 months when I joined Virgin Money, which was Clydesdale Bank at the time, which then became Virgin Money. So yeah, it wasn't an easy environment. But the great, it was a great experience, and I've hopefully brought a lot of that experience into this role and my more recent roles as well. So, yeah.
Thanks, Ross. I can only imagine if someone is barging into all the meetings, where we have to discuss next steps on a couple of critical issues, and especially if that someone who is barging in is a regulator. I can only imagine the kind of pressure you guys might be going through at that point in time. I know. So Target as an organization, has onboarded Tech Mahindra, as an appointed rep. So how was your journey, in terms of appointing Tech Mahindra as an appointed rep at the FCA's office? And in your view, as an AR, what are few of those critical responsibilities that you are expecting, or the regulator for that matter is expecting any AR to kind of be adhering to at all times?
Okay. Yeah. So I think one of the reasons why the appointed representative scheme was put in place by the FCA was because there is a recognition of outsourcing, that banks and people cannot do everything by themselves, and there is a cost-effective way to do it. So they recognize that there will be some services that need to be done, either offshore or by another entity that is better skilled to do it. So what the FCA, the core basis of the FCA is that if you don't have permissions to do regulated activities, you should not be doing them. That's pure, simple baseline. But where an entity like Target has permissions to undertake regulated activities, but it is not able to do all of it by itself, either because of commercial reasons or because there are people better skilled to do it. There are certain services that the FCA allows us to put in place an appointed representative. An appointed representative is basically an entity that you nominate, and you're telling the FCA will undertake certain activities on your behalf as a firm. The FCA will still hold the regulated entity ultimately responsible. And that is, so from a Target point of view, when we appoint Tech Mahindra, some of the key things that we have to put in place. Clearly, Target being the principal firm, we need to undertake the due diligence on the entity we are appointing as the appointed representative. We need to make sure that they have the right capability, skill set, and the right governance and processes in place to undertake those activities. We also need to apply oversight over doing those activities. And when we say oversight, we need to put in place, for example, in Target, we have something called the 3 lines of defense. And that 3 lines of defense is basically you have your first line, you have your second line, you have your third line. Your first line is obviously your having your QA oversight, your quality assurance oversight, the implementation and managing adherence to certain policies. Then you have your risk and compliance team that sits in your second line, and then you have your internal audit team that sits in your third line. For an appointed representative, we need to make sure that those 3 lines of defense are adequately resourced to have in place the right governance and oversight over the activities that we have in effect passed on to Tech Mahindra to do on our behalf. And the reason to do that is that when the FCA comes and asks, oh, if something goes wrong, the FCA will come to target, because we are the ones that have to report it to the FCA, not Tech Mahindra. We have to report it there. So we have to put in place those, and those comes within the conversations when we have with our Tech Mahindra colleagues in terms of the commercials and all those things. We'll put the right governance in place. And also what we need is an annual compliance certificate that will come from either people like yourself, Hardik, to say, okay, we are compliant with X and Y. We've done all these things, and I know we have to do that from a corporate perspective as well within Tech Mahindra, and those are some of the key things that we put in place, because we have to demonstrate to the FCA that we have carefully chosen a partner that we are appointing as an appointed representative, number one. But we also understand what they do on our behalf on a daily basis, and we also understand that we also have put in place the relevant processes to make sure that when things go wrong, we're able to deal with it, and we will make sure that the reporting lines and the governance is there. So it's a burden that we put in place, but the FCA doesn't want a situation where companies just decide, I'll just give things I don't want to do to someone else to do it and not have any, because ultimately everything that is being done from a regulated services point of view has an impact on the end customer. And as I said at the beginning, the ethos is to have that protection for that end customer. So whether it's been done directly by your regulated entity or it's been done by the appointed representative, it has that impact on that end customer.
No, thanks, Akin. Clearly, I think, when I recall, at least in my experience, GDPR was, a regulation wherein for the first time I realized that even for an outsourced firm, the accountability has just multiplied from a UK geography or regulator standpoint. But now that we are learning FCA, how the regulator operates and things, I think looks like that, even in the FCA space, the burden on the outsourced entity, in this case being an appointed rep, is only getting more and more important, and clearly means that both appointed rep and the principal needs to completely function as a unit to ensure that we are getting compliant with all the requirements that the regulator wants us to adhere to, and ensure that customers' interest is protected at all times. Clearly makes sense, Akin. Thank you for that. Coming back, I think to Ross, maybe, clearly, I think I'm sure 3UK has also done all their due diligence when it comes to TechM. And with that sense, if Ross, if you can probably share some light as to what are some of the do's and don'ts for any appointed rep for any financial product, whether it is device finance or any other.
Yeah, certainly, and I think you really touched on it there, Hardik, when you mentioned around how closely we must work together, regardless of geographical location. Because I think that's certainly in my plan. It's very much to create a virtual environment that, regardless of geography or which specific team it is, that we're all working to the same principles, we're all working to the same frameworks, and particularly from an FCA perspective, when we look at things like customer outcomes and our controls and risks that underpin that, I think it's absolutely critical that we work as one team. And certainly, as I say, that's in my plan. For the next 6-9 months or so. It's never been more relevant, I think, than today in 3UK, given that we are now stepping into device financing. So naturally, we have a critical focus from the FCA, and we also have that requirement to ensure that we are being transparent with them. So in regards to do's and don'ts, I think probably a couple of the bullet points that I would note down are that transparency. So that's one that we will manage with the regulator to make sure that they're fully aware of what we're doing and how we're doing it. So we've spent a lot of time over the last few weeks, and this is only week 4 for me, right? So my kind of first 3 or 4 weeks has been really about documenting all the controls and governance which we've got in place, not just within 3UK, but within TechM as well. So I look forward to working very closely with you and the team, and also Kunal and the team, and Pinky and everyone that's involved in it. Actually, I'm going to be out in India in February, so I'm really looking forward to that, because I think we can further enhance a lot of the discussions that we've had, and also some of the controls that we have, particularly around quality assurance, but just the wider FCA piece as well. So I think there's that transparent element that I'll manage with the regulator. There's working together, which I've touched on as well. I think that's absolutely key, that we have almost kind of one working version of what we're doing. So whether that be the assurance frameworks, the ways of working, standard operating procedures, it needs to be fully aligned and it needs to be compliant, right? First and foremost, it needs to be compliant with the regulator. But a lot of the work that's been happening in the background has ensured that we've got that from day one. So from a device finance and the 3Vision perspective, I'm very confident that we're geared up for that, certainly in a lot of the monitoring that we'll carry out across my team in the UK, and also within M&CI, within TechM, and the wider kind of management remit that goes with that as well. And I think the third thing for me is probably about utilising our experience, right? So I've got a vast experience in FCA and working with the regulator. So my ask would be that if there is any, thoughts, challenges, concerns, issues, blockers, that we work together and, we escalate that accordingly. And we can work to specify what that looks like in terms of what the process is. But I think ultimately, if we're not comfortable with either how a product's been sold or how the customers, the outcome for the customer or the experience in general for the customer, then my ask would be that we put our hand up and we have a discussion on that. And I think going back to Akin's point at the beginning of the call, that then gives the regulator trust in what we are doing. If they can see that we are managing and working in line with their principles, then it gives them that trust. And there's a huge focus at the moment. Just going back to Akin's previous point about the appointed rep in that process, there's a huge focus at the moment from the FCA on the overall appointed rep process. There's lots detailed on their website, which we can share as well. But ultimately, they've now got a team that basically oversees appointed rep, and there's a lot of enhanced focus, particularly from a 3UK perspective. But in order to make that work, it needs to be a virtual environment. It needs to be one team, 3UK, TechM, regardless of geography.
Absolutely. No, thank you, Ross. Certainly, firstly, on behalf of TechM, looking forward to meet you in person when you in your next visit to India in February. And I'm sure all my colleagues would have made a note in terms of what are those special do's and don'ts that you just mentioned, just to ensure that we work as a unit, be transparent at all times, and if there is an issue, let's raise our hands up and call out that we need probably more deliberation on this one, just to ensure that we are more compliant towards this new regulation that we will now be working towards.
And I think, sorry, Hardik, just to add to that as well, because I think that's the key bit for me is putting our hand up if we're not sure, because this is a new process for 99% of the 3UK business and for TechM, right? So we'll absolutely make sure that if we don't have the answers directly, then we work with the regulator to get that. So there's, I would just encourage everyone day one and onwards to just make sure that you're being, get in contact if you think there are any challenges.
Absolutely. I think, going forward, FCA handbook is going to be very, very important for all of us to go through. And of course, all the mandatory modules related to FCA is going to be, is going to play an important role. And Akin, we are not going to let you go so easily. So like Ross mentioned, that possibly both 3UK and Tech Mahindra are new in this space. So if anyone is raising a hand, do expect one of that hand reaching out to you, requesting for some help out there.
Yeah, and apologies I can't stay to the end. As Hardik said, I've got to get on a customer call. But any questions around Target is a Tech Mahindra company, so don't hold back in reaching out, asking me questions, and we will absolutely be able to get you the right answers. So we work together to make sure Target obligation to the FCA and the way we provide our services, but also we recognize that we are part of the Tech Mahindra family, and we will enable Tech Mahindra to do what it needs to do in this space as well.
No, thank you, Akin. Possibly, I know we are just short by 4 minutes, so I want to possibly just, on behalf of Tech Mahindra and Tech Mahindra leadership, want to pass on a big thank you, for taking time out, especially at such a difficult and tight time that you had to, just because you had committed earlier to us. So a big thank you on behalf of entire leadership for making time in, Akin, for today's session. I'll quickly move on to Mr. Rahul. For Ross and Akin, pardon me, but when I had reached out to Mr. Rahul, he said that he will be more comfortable in the local Indian language, which is Hindi. However, I have been promised by my team that snippet or translation of this part would be sent across to both of you separately after today's session, just so that all of us are totally aligned. So Rahul ji, मुझे पता है आपका ये चोर सिपाही का मीटिंग बहुत ही होता होगा, और क्योंकि आप साइबर क्राइम मैनेज करते हैं, तो आप ये आजकल लोगों का इंफॉर्मेशन बहुत ज्यादा चोरी होता है. हम लोग आए दिन न्यूज़पेपर में पढ़ते हैं कि कोई मीरा रोड में किसी ने कॉल सेंटर चालू किया है, और बाहर बूढ़े बुजुर्गों का सब इन लोगों ने इंफॉर्मेशन लेके इधर आउट कॉल कर रहे हैं, सब कर रहे हैं. तो कोई एक ऐसा कि ये कैसा होता है, ये कैसे होता है, और फिर इसके बाद इनका कन्विक्शन होता है, क्या सजा होती है इनको?
नमस्ते, मैं असिस्टेंट पुलिस इंस्पेक्टर राहुल भद्रगे बाबुल नगर पुलिस स्टेशन में एपीआई बोल के काम करता हूँ. रिसेंटली मैं अभी एक साइबर सेल में काम करता हूँ. तो अपने इंडिया में, भारत में मोस्टली दो लॉज है. एक आईपीसी इंडियन पिनल कोड और दूसरा है माइनर एक्ट, जो इंफॉर्मेशन टेक्नोलॉजी एक्ट 2000. बेसिकली जब कोई चीट कर जाता है या कोई चीटिंग कर जाता है, कोई थेफ्ट कर जाता है, इसलिए हमारे आईपीसी में इंडियन पिनल कोड में सेक्शन 379 है, जो डाटा थेफ्ट या इसके भी अपन ये कर सकते. कोई भी मूवेबल थिंग्स है वो चोरी हो गए एक जगह से दूसरी जगह पे, तो उसको हम 379 लगाते हैं. उसमें पनिशमेंट 3 years है. दूसरी बात, जो कोई तोतेगिरी बोले तो इम्पर्सोनेशन करके कोई चीट करता है, तो उसने 419 उसके बाद 420 420 अलग अलग जैसा इंसिडेंस या घटना घटित हुई, जैसा क्राइम घटा है, वो टाइप से सेक्शन लगे जाते हैं. उसमें कोई डॉक्यूमेंट्री चीट कर जाता है तो 164 464 465 467 470 478 468 ऐसा लगाया जाता है. उसमें से आप कोई बनावट ये करके यूज करता है, जो ये कि भाई जो चीज है ही नहीं वो गलत है, तो फिर उसको खरा है बोल के, जो ट्रू है बोल के अगर ये करता है, तो उसको 471 लगाते हैं हम. ये तो आईपीसी की धारा में हो गया. अगर कोई डाटा थेफ्ट करता है कोई प्राइवेट जैसा कंपनी में से, तो उसको हम आईपीसी के 379 अदर आईटी एक्ट के सेक्शन 43 66 ऐसा 60C ब्रैकेट C ब्रैकेट D ऐसा लगाते हैं. और उसकी जो पनिशमेंट है इसका 66 के लिए है, तो उसका 3 years मोस्टली 3 years पनिशमेंट है, और उसको 5 लाख 1 लाख रुपए का जुर्माना है, दंड है। और जो अभी जो दाता ठेप की जो ये आईटी कंपनीज है जो हमारे बांगुर नगर पुलिस स्टेशन में जो भी इस्टेब्लिश है, तो हम रूटीन जानकारी इकट्ठा कर लेते हैं कि कोई कंपनी में ऐसा कुछ डाटा लीक हो रहा है क्या। कुछ हमारे जो गुप्त बातमीदार हम ये करते हैं, रिपोर्ट कर देते हैं, और उन्हीं के आधार पे हम वैसा रेड कंडक्ट करके हमने पिछली बार डेढ़ साल पहले और 3 पुलिस स्टेशन का टीम बना के मालवनी, बांगुर नगर और गोरेगांव पुलिस स्टेशन, मालाड पुलिस स्टेशन मिल के 3 रेड करा था कंडक्ट। और उसमें से बहुत सा डाटाज, मोबाइल्स, लैपटॉप्स एंड ये सीपीयू ऐसा बहुत सा इलेक्ट्रॉनिक डिवाइस हमने क्राइम रजिस्टर करके जब्त कर सीज कर लिया था। तो हमारा प्रोग्राम चालू ही रहता, हमारा जानकारी निकालना और रेड कंडक्ट करना।
बहुत बढ़िया। आई थिंक फर्स्टली पूरे टेक महिंद्रा के तरफ से आई थिंक हम लोग को बहुत रिस्पेक्ट है मुंबई पुलिस के लिए। सो पूरे टेक महिंद्रा के बिहाफ पर बिग थैंक यू। आप जो भी काम कर रहे हैं, आई थिंक बहुत ही हार्श कंडीशंस रहती है, डिफिकल्ट टाइम्स रहते हैं। मेरे कुछ दोस्त हैं पुलिस और डिफेंस में, और मुझे पता है कि आप लोग का ड्यूटी टाइम वगैरह इज ऑल्सो वेरी डिफिकल्ट। फिर भी आप इतना करते हैं देश के लिए, हमारे सिक्योरिटी के लिए। सो उसके लिए सबसे पहले तो बहुत धन्यवाद। फॉलोड बाय दैट आई थिंक हर बार अपने मूवीज में, पुराने मूवीज में सुनते हैं भाई ये तो 420 कर रहा है एटसेट्रा। सो नाउ हम लोग को अब पता चल रहा है ये 420 खुद एक सेक्शन है आईपीसी के अंदर, जिसका कुछ महीनों के लिए नहीं पर 3 साल की सजा गवर्नमेंट आई मीन कोर्ट देती है, और जुर्माना भी बहुत कैश में बहुत देना पड़ेगा। सो थैंक यू ये हमारे जानकारी बढ़ाने के लिए राहुल सर। फर्स्टली सो दैट एवरीवन एल्स इज अवेयर, it wasn't Rahul wasn't initially was supposed to be part of today's session, but just because the other gentleman, Mr. Vivek, had to urgently attend a very critical and important investigation, Rahul ji सिर्फ हमारे एक phone call request से he agreed and accepted today's session. और फट से बोला कि ठीक है चलिए मैं आता हूँ, एंड आई विल प्रॉबली ये आईपीसी के बारे में क्या implications है, एंड व्हाट वुड बी द consequence if anyone is trying to play around with the law. So thank you राहुल जी, आप इतने छोटे समय में आप even आए भी, so thank you so much for that. Ross, trust me, you are not going to miss out on anything. All Rahul mentioned was throwing lots and lots of IPC sections, which is in Indian Penal Code, to state that at the end of it, if there is any data privacy issues by any of the within Indian boundaries, it will result into imprisonment of up to 3 years. Or possibly with an added penalty of up to 500,000 Indian rupees. But now, coming back to FC and yourself, Ross, I know that FC obligations, while as easy it may sound that we need to protect customers' interest at all times, but at the same time, I'm sure the business expectation is to protect commercial outcomes as well at all times. So how do you, in your view, how do you reckon that, how easy would it be to seamlessly incorporate FC obligations while ensuring there is no business or commercial, disruption, so to say?
Yeah, so it's a difficult balance. I think it's first to acknowledge that. Naturally, we want to make sure that the commercial interests are protected, of course, and all the good things that we do within the customer contact centre, all the great ways in which we interact with our customers. But at the same time, we now have a third regulator to consider, as if 2 wasn't enough, right? So we now have a third. But I think in all of the work that's taken place in the background over the last 3 or 6 months or so in readiness for the FCA launch and particularly, 3Vision, I think there's been a lot of great work that's went in there to, certainly from my team's point of view, to make sure that we've got a really good monitoring program in place, which takes into account the needs and requirements of the FCA. I think undoubtedly there will be, Hardik, a period of embedding that, over the next probably 3 or 6 months. But I think longer term, from a commercial and FCA perspective, I think we will find ourselves in a position very quickly where the FCA, and how we adhere to FCA regulations is just very much part of our day-to-day job. I think initially we need to make sure that everyone's aware of what we're doing and why we're doing it. And I think sessions like this will help. There's a number of different FCA-specific material that I can share, for perhaps some weekend reading. There's a lot of it, so be warned. But I think it's really good to just understand the basics and the principles in which the FCA, operate within. And then the work that we'll continue to do as a function, so that the work that I'll, work closely with Kunal and the team to make sure that we are consistent, we're calibrating, we're acting upon all the different feedback, not just from my team, but the findings within TechM as well. And I mentioned that kind of virtual working environment. I think that's critical to quickly getting us to a position where the FCA is very much the norm in terms of what we're doing. But there will be a period of embedding that, and I think from a commercial perspective, we've acknowledged that, right? So things like average handling times, for example, we appreciate are, will be slightly different during that period. It's a brand new, not just the FCA, but the 3Vision in general is a new concept for the business. So naturally there'll be a period of embedding that. So we've accounted for that within things like handling time, and we've also accounted for it in terms of our control. So we'll make sure that the 3UK team works very closely with TechM to make sure that we're consistent and we're adherent to the right regulations.
No, certainly. I think material for a weekend read and sessions like this would certainly help. And I think you have mentioned more than once, about myself and Kunal Rege in this session. So Rege, no pressure on you as yet. So possibly all of that pressure Ross is going to put on you and me once he is here next month, which is just about 7 days from today. But having said that, I know that you did mention, how important, quality monitoring and governance is. But maybe if you can, throw some light in terms of how is your expectation in terms of the governance and quality control model actually should be working in an ideal state, or maybe possibly your vision from 3 to 6 months down the line, that both 3UK and TechM can collaborate and deliver effective outcomes then?
Sure. So, I think, listen, the models is fairly straightforward. So we've got the TechM teams that will be responsible and accountable for the sales and acquisition through 3Vision. We've then got a great team in M&CI, which carry out a number of great assurance activities, not just for 3Vision, but across the wider TechM remit. And then you have my team in the UK. So there's almost kind of 3 specific areas that work towards that governance and control model. But like Akin had touched on as well, we operate in that 3 lines of defence model. So we have that within the UK team. We have my team as the first line of defence, so that assurance function. And we would be accountable for monitoring the activities in TechM and M&CI, and working closely with everyone involved there. And I know that there's a significant number of people, so it'll be great to work closely with them all. But we also then have, in the UK, we have our compliance function, and that compliance function, acting as the second line, if you like, in that 3 lines of defence, are there to ensure that my team and our teams in TechM are operating effectively. Now, like I said, we've spent a lot of time over the last few weeks to document everything in terms of what our controls look like, how we'll be monitoring individuals, how we'll be monitoring calls, making sure that it's lined up with FCA, with Ofcom, with ICO, to make sure that all our regulatory obligations are fulfilled. And then on top of that, we also have CCF, right? So we've got an additional layer of, like I say, as if we needed another one, we have a kind of fourth view. So my team will be accountable for all of that and pulling it all together. And I think short term, as in, you know, for launch in the next week or so, we'll have that kind of segregated three-stage approach, and we'll also have the 3 lines of defence model that sits on top of all that. But then, as I say, I think as it evolves into the next 3 and 6 months, and really I'm hoping that my visit to India will bring a lot of this to life for me, because Kunal and I have spent some time just going through what the structure looks like in MNCI and what some of the roles and accountabilities are. But for me, in order to bring that to light, it will be great to see it face to face and actually in the live environment, right? It's okay seeing it on PowerPoint or a presentation, but I'm really looking forward to actually seeing, you know, the benefits of that team. And then, like I've said, that in that virtual sense, we need to make sure that we have one virtual team that are doing it in exactly the same way. There'll be slightly different accountabilities for the 3 UK team in terms of that oversight for TechM, but that's a requirement of the regulator, right? But we'll make sure that we work closely. So I think initially we'll have that oversight model, three lines of defence, plus my UK team, plus MNCI, plus the TechM team who are involved in the sales and acquisition. We've also got a lot of activity in the UK as well that sits outside of the sales environment, so I can share some more details on that, you know, after the call. But ultimately, we have a lot of the kind of post-sale activity, like complaints, you know, collections, all that detail that sits largely within the UK sites. So my team look after that as well from a monitoring point of view. So we have that fully rounded FCA requirement, I think, on day one, which is great, considering that it's a really new principle for 3 UK and TechM in terms of the FCA monitoring. But yeah, as I say, as we step out of the first probably quarter, then it's really about how we make that one virtual entity. So I'm sure that will be my first trip of many to India, so I'm very much looking forward to it.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for that, Ross. I think now, while it may sound like there is too much pressure on commercial heads, you know, risk and compliance team here and Kunal, but looking forward, of course, looking forward to meet you in February in the visit, and you know, all the presentations that you have seen, you would possibly now. We will be demonstrating you in flesh of how actually all the controls that we have possibly been discussing are actually getting deployed and would result in tighter governance for this as a partnership. Finally, any last piece of advice that you would like to give, you know, for everybody here, including we have representative from not only quality team, risk and compliance, but operations, SDI, you know, and so many other support teams today.
I think the key message for me is really just, like I said, is escalate if we think we have a challenge or an issue or something that we're not sure of. So please don't be afraid to put your hand up. Get in touch. I'm happy for anyone to get in touch with me directly or through Kunal or yourself, just so that we can have a clear, you know, line of escalation. And then what I can do is I can work closely with the regulator, and I can also work closely with the teams in the UK. For example, you know, Barry and the sales team, and also like Dave and the care elements as well. So we've got a really good stakeholder network. Just make sure that everyone's putting their hand up if they're not sure, or if they think there's something that perhaps doesn't look right, or, you know, they're maybe unsure of a process, or they feel that it's not delivering the right outcome for the customer, or perhaps from a compliance perspective, is it borderline, or is there maybe a question mark? Then let's just bring it to the table. So I think there'll be lots of great sessions around calibration and making sure that we're consistent in there. So there's lots of great forums and opportunities to do so. But if there is anything urgent, then, you know, please raise your hand and reach out. And I think as well, just going back to the FCA, Akin had mentioned that at the beginning, you know, the regulator are very flexible in terms of how they operate. So, you know, the example that I gave at the beginning of the call is the more extreme one, but actually in day-to-day practice, the regulator is also very transparent. They'll give us guidelines. They won't tell us exactly how to do it. We then need to interpret that as a business, and that's where I come in to try and support that. So, yeah, they are a very supportive organisation, I have to say. So some real positives in working with the FCA. and they've got a great deal of experience as well, as you can imagine. So the challenge that we have within 3UK is that because we're a new FCA entity as such, we need to establish that relationship all over again. It's not, I don't have a contact number for someone in the FCA that I can use. I wish I did, but not yet.
No,
Soon,
I
hopefully.
think certainly. Yeah, I think over the period we'll have to build as a unit that confidence and give it to FCA as a regulator to say that we are running a tighter shop here in the interest, of customer and so within the remit of the regulations later on. मुझे पता है राहुल जी, आपने बहुत सारे सेक्शंस के बारे में बताया, कितना जेल टर्म हो सकता है, कितना पेनल्टी हो सकता है. कुछ आपकी तरफ से अगर आपको कुछ आखिरी एडवाइस देनी हो हम लोगों को, जो हम लोग अपने बाकी दोस्तों को भी बता सके जो आज शायद मीटिंग में ना आ पाए हो, कि भाई क्या बचना है या क्या नहीं करना है या क्या हमेशा करना चाहिए, अगर आपकी तरफ से भी कुछ अगर आप बता पाएं तो प्लीज.
पहले तो जो भी जो एम्प्लॉइज है, एम्प्लॉइज के बारे में थोड़ा हिस्ट्री उनका थोड़ा देख लेना चाहिए. एक्चुअली ये बंदा पहले कहाँ काम करता था, अभी कहाँ से काम छोड़ के आया है, ये भी थोड़ा बैक हिस्ट्री भी थोड़ा चेक कर लेना चाहिए. बाद में थोड़ा बीच में थोड़ा काउंटर इंस्पेक्शन होना चाहिए. बोले तो ये बंदा ये काम करता है तो बोले तो उसको समझ में
बराबर कर रहा है कि नहीं,
हाँ तो बराबर करना है तो थोड़ा इस चेकअप होना चाहिए. और दूसरी बात, जो भी इलेक्ट्रॉनिक डिवाइस वो ये करते हैं तो ज्यादा ऐसा उसको पासवर्ड वगैरह है उसके बारे में थोड़ा अवेयरनेस, बोले स्ट्रिक्टली अवेयरनेस होना चाहिए. डबल टू स्टेप ऑथेंटिफिकेशन बोल के ऐसा कुछ आपके सिस्टम में होना चाहिए जो आपका इसका कोई लीक नहीं होना, और उसी के आधार पे कोई उस ग्राहकों की कोई जानकारी लीक बोले उसका कोई मिसयूज नहीं करना, कोई इकोनॉमिक फाइनेंशियल ऑफेंस मत नहीं करना चाहिए.
बिल्कुल नहीं. थैंक यू सो मच राहुल जी. आई थिंक हम लोग की हमेशा ये कोशिश रहती है, जो आपने बोला, आई थिंक BGC करके एक चीज है जो हम लोग हमेशा करते हैं. हम लोग आपने बोला मोबाइल फोन इलेक्ट्रॉनिक डिवाइस नहीं होना चाहिए, हम लोग ऑफिस में हमेशा ये वर्जित है, सो लोग नहीं ला सकते हैं. सो बीच में अगर हम लोग हर एक का काम चेक करते रहते हैं कि भाई बराबर कर रहे हैं, रूल्स रेगुलेशन के हिसाब से कर रहे हैं. सो थैंक यू सो मच. हम लोग ये बिल्कुल पूरे टाइम ये करते रहते हैं. सो दीज एडवाइस वुड सर्टनली हेल्प अस अपना ऑफिस चलाने के लिए बेहतरी ही कर पाएंगे हम लोग. सो थैंक यू सो मच for that, Rahul ji. With that, everyone comes to an end of this wonderful and very insightful panel discussion. What I will probably now do is take a pause, and ask for any questions if you guys have for either Mr. Ross or Mr. Rahul, please. I see a lot of people raising their hands. Shri, JD, if one of you can please allow one of them to go first.
Sure, Hardik. There's already a question that's posted by Newton for Ross. Ross, Newton wants to know, what are you looking forward to most, considering this is your first visit over here to India?
Question, thank you. Listen, I'm looking forward to meeting everyone. I think there's a certain element of introductions that you can do over WebEx or virtually, but I think I'm a big believer in face-to-face interactions and actually understanding how everything works on site. So yeah, really looking forward to that. I'm really looking forward to visiting the country. It's my first trip to India, so yeah, really looking forward to that. And hopefully I've had a lot of good recommendations already, so if you have any recommendations, please share them when I'm there, whether it's food, places to visit. I'll be out for 10 days, I think, overall. So, and that's, as I say, that'll be the first trip of many. I think there'll be quite a few after that as well.
We are looking forward to that as well, Ross, certainly. Do we have more questions posted online, Shri?
Yes, I've got Jamil. I've just sent a request to you. If you want to unmute yourself, yeah.
Good morning, Ross. This question is for you. With device finance being a new proposition coming our way, what are your key expectations from TechM with regards to device finance delivery?
I think first and foremost that all of the regulatory expectations are there. Like I mentioned earlier, there's a fine balance between the commercial elements and the regulatory elements, and my job is difficult, right, because I need to negotiate between the commercial and the FCA side and the regulatory. So I think expectations are that we absolutely must, first and foremost, we must, deliver to those regulations, but we also must ensure that there's a great customer experience in every contact that we have. And I think initially that's a new process, right? So we need to make sure that as we evolve that, the customer experience gets greater and greater. But yeah, day one, we need to make sure that we're fulfilling our regulatory obligations and that we're being adherent. But at the same time, we need to make sure the customer's experience is great. There's no sense in us, ticking all the boxes from the regulator point of view if it's taken, hours and hours to complete a customer interaction. So that's the bit that we need to, there's a fine balance. But yeah, first and foremost, regulatory obligations.
Thanks, Ross. With that, a follow-up question in terms of consequence management around non-compliance. Can you share some light on consequence management as well?
Yeah, so there's a wide range of consequences that the FCA can impart on us. And again, I'll share a bit more information on this after the call because there's loads and loads of resources online, which I'll share. But ultimately, that can range, in terms of consequence, it can range from financial penalties, it can range to enforcement, as I touched on earlier. So you can actually have the FCA in the office, which we don't want, or certainly we don't want that anytime soon. And you can also have individual penalties and actual, there can be fiscal issues there as well for the people who are deemed as our senior management regime. So there can be legal implications for them as well. And ultimately, we could be stripped of our ability to sell device financing and any FCA regulated product. But that's the more extreme of it. That in the first instance, I think FCA are very engaging, so they'll work closely with us if they think there's an issue or a problem. They won't move directly to, bringing someone into the office or issuing fines. It'll be much more collaborative in the first instance, and that's where I can come in to support and make sure that we don't get, further down the line in terms of any issues.
Thanks so much, Ross. Totally appreciate that. There's another question for you. I think you're on a roll today. There's a question from Sunil Punjabi. He wants to know that understand what the FC obligations that are pretty complex. Is there any simple operational checklist that we can leverage on which helps us gauge our compliance at all times?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Thank you. Because if you read the FCA principles and obligations, sometimes it can be quite complex, and sometimes actually you think, how does that translate to our business? So the work that my team have been doing over the past few weeks is to look at, I guess, from a monitoring perspective, how do we apply that within the business? So there are some, what we've classed as scorecards, essentially, that we can share, which really looks at what my team would be looking for. And that's not just from a regulatory point of view, but it does also give some guidance in terms of the areas that we would be monitoring. And it looks at Ofcom adherence, it looks at FCA adherence. And I've also asked the team, so this will follow in the next few weeks, but I've also asked the team to clearly articulate on those scorecards which part of the FCA principle it relates to, so that clearly from your end in TechM, you can see exactly where we are monitoring and how the FCA would expect us to monitor. If that helps.
Definitely helps, Ross. Thank you so much. Bhavesh, I guess you've got a question. I've just sent a request to you.
So I think my question is to Rahul sir. Considering आपका काम इतना stressful होता है, it's a very stressful work that you have. राइट? तो आप अपने फ्री टाइम में क्या करते हैं स्ट्रेस को खत्म करने के लिए?
बेसिकली ज़्यादा टाइम तो मिलता नहीं, जितना टाइम मिलता है उसमें थोड़ा बच्चों के साथ मैं बैडमिंटन खेल लेता हूँ, थोड़ा मूवी, हफ्ते में एक ही दिन वीकली ऑफ मिलता है, वो भी 15-20 दिनों में एक बार। और बाकी
अच्छा।
कुछ अपना थोड़ा जो अपना इसमें थोड़ा थोड़ा अपडेट रहना पड़ता है हर दिन। अभी साइबर के नए नए फंडे यूज होते हैं तो उनके ये करके उसके लिए जानकारी हासिल कर लेता हूँ। कुछ साइबर के सेमिनार रहते हैं तो वो अटेंड कर लेता हूँ।
वाह, मतलब छुट्टी के दिन भी काम ही कर रहे हैं आप?
यस सर, मोस्टली।
चलो, थैंक यू सो मच राहुल सर।
राहुल सर, एक क्वेश्चन आपके लिए भी है, ऑडियंस से पूछा है। आपके हर रोज कितने साइबर क्राइम की केसेस रिकॉर्ड होते हैं बॉम्बे में, और एक केस सॉल्व करने के लिए कितना दिन या कितने हफ्ते या कितने महीने लगते हैं?
सर अभी तो है ना, अपने इंडिया में हर किसी को ऑनलाइन ये करने की आदत सी पड़ी है। कोई चाय पीता है तो उसके भी 5 रुपए बिल इस पे QR कोड से ये करता है। डिफरेंट टाइप्स ऑफ फंड है जो अपने साथ साइबर चीट हो रहा है अभी सोसाइटी में बहुत से सर। उसमें कोई KYC फ्रॉड है, कोई बोलता है मैं बैंक से ऐसा बात कर रहा हूँ, मैनेजर हूँ, ऐसे ऐसे जानकारी आपका आधार कार्ड ये नंबर ये मंगा लेते हैं, उसी आधार पे उनकी जानकारी हासिल कर लेते हैं। दूसरा है कोई आपको बोलता है कि आपका लोन है, आपको लोन ये करता हूँ, लोन चाहिए तो आप अपनी जानकारी शेयर करिएगा। कोई बोलता है इसके आपका पावर कट हो रहा है, अभी जो उसके वास्ते जो ऐसा बोलते हैं वो जानकारी हासिल कर लेते हैं, उसी आधार पे उनके अकाउंट में से पैसे डिडक्ट कर लेते हैं। अभी हाल ही में जो अभी क्रेडिट कार्ड के भी फ्रॉड बहुत से चालू हो रहे हैं। अभी उसके बारे में कोई ऐसा क्रेडिट कार्ड ऐसा थोड़ी हमने कुछ केस ऐसा ये हुआ है कि उसमें है ना कोई कंपनी भी अपना डाटा ये करते हैं। वो जो फ्रॉडस्टर जामतारा के फ्रॉडस्टर ने एक बार मैंने सुन लिया था कि ये जो IT सेक्टर के जो कंपनी वो भी कुछ डाटा उनसे बड़े अमाउंट ये करके हासिल कर लेते हैं, तभी तो उतना कर पाते हैं। अभी वो जो चीट इसके जो फ्रॉड के है उसके बारे में मैं थोड़ा एक्सप्लेन कर दूं थोड़ा। वो ऐसे अभी जो QR कोड से एक स्कैम हो रहा सर अभी हमारी सोसाइटी में। OLX पे कोई अपना चीज बेचने के लिए या खरीदने के लिए पिक्चर डालता है और उससे बाद फ्रॉडस्टर बात कर लेता है कि मुझे आपका फर्नीचर अच्छा लगा है, मुझे चाहिए 5000 में। तो वो बोल के ठीक है उनके साथ कन्वर्सेशन कर लेता है सर, मीठी मीठी बातों में उसको ये कर लेता है और एक QR कोड पे उसको पेमेंट करने को बोलता है। QR कोड से पैसा जाता ही सर, किसी का आता नहीं। वैसा एक बार ये होगा कि बार बार उसको बोल दे कि नहीं आपका QR कोड बराबर स्कैम हुआ नहीं, तो और वापिस उससे पैसा ले लेते हैं। दूसरी बात ये अपना गूगल पे बहुत से लोगों को नियरेस्ट मोबाइल शॉप, नियरेस्ट पेट्रोल पंप, नियरेस्ट हॉस्पिटल, नियरेस्ट होटल, ये ऐसे बहुत से लोग ऑनलाइन सर्च करते हैं। तो वो फ्रॉडस्टर ने गूगल पे क्या करा सर, कोई भी ये करता है तो फ्रॉडस्टर के जो नंबर है तो एक्चुअली 4 नंबर 5 नंबर फ्रॉडस्टर के ही है। गूगल पे आप सर्च करते हो तो कस्टमर पे तो वही नंबर फ्रॉडस्टर के, फिर वो उनसे संपर्क करते हैं आप उनकी भाई नजदीक पुलिस स्टेशन कहाँ है, नजदीक रेलवे स्टेशन, तो जो बात करते हैं तो वो फ्रॉडस्टर का ही नंबर लग जाता है। फिर उसको बातों में उससे सब उससे जानकारी शेयर करके उसके अकाउंट के बारे में इसके बारे में ये करके उन लोगों के साथ ये कर लेते हैं, फ्रॉड कर लेते हैं। और ऐसे तकरीबन पुलिस स्टेशन में कम से कम 8-10 तो लोग हर दिन आते हैं। अभी 2000 एप्लीकेशन पेंडिंग है हमारे इधर बांगुर नगर ओवरऑल में। और जब हम ये साइबर क्राइम जब इन्वेस्टिगेट करने को जाते हैं सर, तो मोस्टली ओडिशा, पश्चिम बंगाल, जामतारा, ये जो बिहार, ये साइड के जो मोबाइल शॉपीज वाले हैं वो क्या करते हैं सर, जो कोई अपना सिम लेने को जाता है तो उसको जो आधार कार्ड पे उसको डबल क्लिक करके उसका एक ही नाम पे 2 सिम अलाउ कर देते हैं। एक सिम उसको देते हैं और दूसरा वाला सिम मोबाइल शॉपी वाला अपने पास रखता है। और जो भी ऐसे फ्रॉडस्टर जो गैंग है, जो बड़े जामतारा इसमें जो ऐसा ये चलाते हैं ये लोग, तो उन लोगों को सर सिर्फ 300 रुपए 500 रुपए में वो सिम बेचा करते हैं। जब इन्वेस्टिगेशन में हम जब फ्रॉडस्टर पे कोई चीट करके जब किसी के खाते में अकाउंट ट्रांसफर होती है तो यही ऐसे जो सिम कार्ड यूज करते हैं। और दूसरी बात, ऐसे ही लोगों के नाम पे हर किसी के बैंक का अपना खाता ओपन कर लेते हैं सर ये फ्रॉडस्टर लोग। उसी के लिए उसको कुछ 40,000 रुपए 50,000 रुपए ऐसा पे करते हैं। ऐसे से ज्यादातर ये चालू है। और जब पकड़ा जाता है तो उसको पता भी नहीं चलता कि सर मेरे नाम पे मोबाइल शॉपी वाले ने कार्ड लिया है और किसी ने मेरे नाम पे अदर बैंक खाता खुलवा के लिए आपके लिए यूज कर रहा है। ऐसा चालू है अभी। तो
थैंक यू राहुल सर। आई थिंक हम लोग भी ये क्योंकि टेलीकॉम कंपनी को सपोर्ट करते हैं, सो देयर इज समथिंग कॉल्ड सिम स्वैप व्हिच इज प्रीटी प्रेवलेंट इन द यूके। जो अभी आप जो बता रहे हैं is quite similar to that. So thank you. I know, 5 बज चुके हैं and both Ross and Rahul has other meetings to attend due to prior commitments. But thank you so much, both of you gentlemen. While Akin couldn't be with us till end of today's session, but thank you to all three of you. Over to you, JD.
Thanks, Hardik. Thanks for a great session. So thank you, Hardik, for moderating this. राहुल सर, थैंक यू सो मच, आपने टाइम निकाला। जैसे हार्दिक ने पहले बोला था कि ये लास्ट मिनट रिक्वेस्ट था, आपको आज ही एक बार हमने रिक्वेस्ट किया और आप आ गए, सो उसके लिए बहुत थैंक यू। आपने जो भी शेयर किया बहुत ज़्यादा हमारे रेलेवेंट है, हम इससे बहुत कुछ सीख के जा रहे हैं। रॉस, कांट थैंक यू इनफ। आई थिंक यू डिड ऑल द हेवी लिफ्टिंग. Most of the questions came your way. I'm sure that when you are in India, you won't have even 1 second free to yourself because we'll be brimming with even more questions and raring to put it your way. And don't worry, this team which is on the call today is great with recommendations when it comes to food. In fact, you'll be overstuffed. Where in India we make that as a promise. Super. Guys, I'm sure you had a great time today for the session. Before we wrap, can I please request Samad to do the closing?
Thank you, JD. First of all, thank you, JD, Hardik, and the entire team for organizing this. It's the first time we're doing something on this scale from a compliance standpoint, and FCA is something that we really want to do well. So thank you, Ross, for taking out your time, sharing your insights and expertise. And Hardik, please pass on my thank you to Akin too. And the expectation from the group is, guys, whatever you've learned from what Ross, Akin, and Rahulji has shared, if we can take this up as one of the big kind of North Stars on ensuring that device finance is one big success for us. We've done a fab job in the last almost 20 years that we've been working with Three. We just need device finance to be the next pivot, and like we do best at what we do right now. We have to make this the next big kind of milestone for us. So Ross, you have our commitment that we will drive everything in the manner that you expect us to, and we will be committed to kind of drive the results for Three. So thank you everybody. Rahul ji, मैं आपके पास personally आने वाला हूँ thank you बोलने के लिए, तो 2 मिनट और मैं आपके रूम में रहूँगा. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you so much, guys.
So,
Cheers. Thank you, Ross.
thanks, guys. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, everyone.